evil. Welcome to Raccoon City. This one is directed by Johannes Roberts. Now, Johannes Roberts is actually responsible for one of my most favourite modern films, that being 47 Meters Down, although I was less keen on the sequel. And I was actually a fan of the Resident Evil games when they first came out on PlayStation 1. I played all through the original game, and I also loved the fourth one. They were my kind of favourites. But I've given up gaming for about a decade now, so I'm a little bit out the loop when it comes to the gaming world, although I'm somewhat familiar with this franchise. And I still, to a point, enjoyed the Mila Jovovich movies, especially the earlier ones. So this one is a reboot of the franchise, and it takes place, I guess you want to say, it tries to recreate elements from the first and second game, really having two storylines. The first being Claire Redfield and Leon Kennedy doing the Resident Evil 2 series, which tends to be the focus. Trying to find out what's going on, going through the Raccoon City and all that. And then we have the first film with Chris Redfield, Faye Valentine, Wesker, etc., going through the mansion, and these two converge. That's your basic storyline here. I think this would have been a better movie, maybe better received, had it not said it's a Resident Evil film and just been a zombie film. So, yes, there's no doubt this is more accurate to the games than the Mila Jovovich movies. That is without a doubt. Although this still does miss the mark, I feel, certainly with its characters. But what can I say that works? I do think this movie, first half an hour, is fairly strong. When we first introduce these zombie-like creatures, there are some sequences here that I feel are fairly well shot and do come across as quite creepy at times. Now, I've mentioned Johannes Roberts directed 47 Meters Down, and as I said in my review of that one, that was a masterclass in tension. So I know that Johannes Roberts has the ability to build tension, and I see glimpses of it with this film. I have the feeling, because this is a franchise film, there's probably a lot of studio oversight here. And as such, it needs to be what I would call a bubblegum horror film. So it never really feels like it commits to its horror elements to me. But there are sequences and there are shots here that I do think hint towards what could have been a truly horrific movie had it had the tenacity to go through that with that level of horror here. But there are some eerie sequences. I do think some of the the makeup of the zombies, and they have this, they're almost like semi-zombies, where they seem to be semi-sentient for a while and still able to nearly communicate and things like this. And I think that was quite creepy. So you see almost like a transition into the the full-on zombies, and you're seeing they look more like infected humans, at least for a time being. And I quite liked that. I think some of the set location here is pretty good, and you will see lots of Easter eggs for the games and things like that, elements. I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of these are put in there just for the sake of being in there. I don't really serve a huge amount of plot. And in a way, I actually would have preferred this the story elements be a little different. I will come on to it. But yeah, if you're fans of the games, you go, oh, I know that bit from the game, things like this. And obviously it's a relatively medium budget film. I think the budget was around 20 million. So there is a relatively reasonable budget, certainly for a horror film, where we do see set pieces, more elaborate sets, lots of extras and things like this. And there is definitely a flavour of the Resident Evil games in this one, which I think maybe was lacking in the the previous franchise here. And yeah, there's it's fairly well paced. There's lots of action in it. I think I think had this not have been a example of the Resident Evil marketing and kind of like subject, and you just had a zombie film, and they kind of let more into the kind of the horror element, and they probably wouldn't have had this budget, to be fair. But yeah, it could have been a pretty good zombie flick. But the problem is here, I think, is the this coming from a major studio. I believe this is a Sony production, and they've obviously mandated what they want from this film. And as I've mentioned, it's kind of a bubblegum horror. It's nothing too horrific. It tries to cram in elements from the first and second games, and I didn't feel either of these were fully developed. You count how much time Chris Redfield has as a kind of on screen. It's not a lot. You know, you almost forget he's there. And the problem is, while sticking so close to the kind of the source material, you know, all of our main characters are wearing plot armor, whilst you kind of get, oh, Vickers, don't know him from the other game, you're clearly going to die. Things like this. So it's like, you know, we know our main characters are going to survive. We know these other ones are going to die. So it kind of deflates any kind of real contention here. I wish they had stuck to kind of maybe one element of the kind of the story, be it from the first or the second game, and kind of stuck to that. Had a little bit more kind of like exploration of building up the tension and things like this. As it stands at the moment, I never really feel like the story is is particularly kind of well developed, and it so feels like the beginning of a franchise. I mean, it's one of these films that is frustrating in the kind of the sense that, you know, it's trying to set up stuff for future movies. It's like, just make the movie you've got in front of you. You know, make that the best movie you can. Stop trying to kind of like, you know, save stuff for the sequels and things like this, because, you know, people want to see it now. It's like the Snake Eyes movie, when you will have Snake Eyes right at the end. It's frustrating, and these things probably will never happen. And then we have to talk about the miscasting here. I've seen this compared to a TV movie. I don't know if I would, maybe a streaming movie from Netflix, I guess, that, you know, you could say that. But I think the problem is here, a lot of TV actors, a lot of kind of like network TV actors are in this kind of movie, which does give it a somewhat of a TV feel to it. I actually think they would have been better off having no real recognisable names, and, you know, even though, you know, Robbie Amell might not be a particularly kind of you know, recognisable name for many, you kind of recognise these people from various kind of TV shows, and it does give it that kind of TV feel to it. And I have to say as well, the characters seem very far removed from the game characters. So whilst I think this movie does have elements of the games on an aesthetic level, there's, you know, we recognise playing the piano to open up a door, things like this, the keys, all of this kind of things. Yes, the kind of the zombie dogs, yeah, blah, 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 all great, you know. I feel the characters here are miscast in regards to, you know, they could have had better representations of game characters, maybe with less kind of TV actors. And also they just, the characterization that we do have, in particular, a couple of, like Wesker and Leon, I feel are very, very different from their kind of like their game counterparts. You know, you kind of feel like, again, it's a missed opportunity. And finally, I have to say, I think the overabundance of kind of CGI enhancements here is, and you're thinking, why? I don't know why they've done it again. You know, we have the liquor sequence, and it's just like a CGI monster. We have kind of a CGI. I guess you have to do some of the CGI with some of these things. But, like, you know, we have like the CGI kind of zombie birds, and it just looks a little crappy. The CGI isn't particularly good here, and I understand for maybe the final boss you might not name that because it's so elaborate. You may need, it kind of goes beyond kind of you know, practical effects here. But I would have liked to have seen other things that weren't in the original Resident Evil film. You know, we didn't need a CGI liquor because that was in the first Resident Evil film. I was still hoping for that, the damn zombie shark, you know. But no, we never got that, so we don't really, I don't feel we see things that we haven't seen before. And like I said, I think this movie is trying to have its cake and eat it, so have too many kind of references and try and tread familiar ground. And it's a little bit of a waste of an opportunity. But, you know, I think a lot of these problems are from the fact that this is a Resident Evil film rather than a zombie film. Had this been a no-name zombie film, I think you can get away with it and have it as an enjoyable film. So I'm going to kind of like look at my review in regards to that, and not let it be kind of too weighted in the fact that I feel this is kind of like not a good entry for a franchise, rather than looking at the film itself. I'm still only going to give it a 5 out of 10. But I don't think it's not an enjoyable film. I do think if you are a horror fan, there is something to enjoy here, albeit it's a bubblegum horror. There you go. 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.